Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signore, and I'm so happy to be here with the black belt barrister himself. Daniel, how you doing, man?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for being here. We hyped this up because I wanted to get your reaction. Obviously, this Australia perjury charge is getting a lot of heat. We've seen it all online. We've talked about it here on the channel. In fact, there's been clues along from Adam Waldman. Is he in Australia? He keeps sharing these flags, and people are sharing that 2020 clip from the Australian the council, sort of making it clear that they were coming after Amber. But I wanted to bring you here, and if you guys aren't already following Black Belt Barrister, please go on over, hit the subscribe, and join him. He's been doing some amazing content over there that's just still blowing up. So kudos to all your success. But we've talked about this issue previously, but this Australia case could be crucial in the UK appeal. No, I mean, and for those that don't also know, it's important. I want to mention this several times throughout. Daniel's trying to reopen the appeal here in the UK in the defamation case, given the ruling by Justice Nicol that really just didn't feel correct. And so a lot of the ruling that the justice did involved a lot of things that have been proven incorrect, including the donations and so on. But right now, a big part of it was sort of not taking Kate James and the other assistants' testimony, Kevin Murphy, as credible, as fair testimony. If they were to be found, if she is found as she's perjured herself in Australia, do you think that will have ramifications in helping the UK appeal get more attention?
It has to, because the rules in the UK, I mean, they're very tight and they're very strict. I mean, on appeals in general, and certainly, reopening an appeal is the pinnacle of difficulty. However, if the person who is really at the center of all this is subsequently found to be criminally liable for perjury for matters that are central to this case, which, if we unpick it a little bit, the credibility aspect, I mean, her credibility was at stake within this UK judgment, and the judge came to a conclusion that it didn't impinge her credibility. However, if that is now upturned in the Australia jurisdiction, and they say, no, we hold her accountable for perjury for all the reasons we're about to discuss, that turns on its head everything the judge found in that judgment, and therefore her credibility is shot. Therefore, the whole premise of the judgment is surely unsafe, which is what the lawyers argued in their application for permission to appeal. They said it was an unsafe judgment, unreasoned, and her credibility should have been looked at more seriously.
Well, and that's what you have some document here. Which I was going to say, not sorry, but to talk about that credibility issue, because I want to go through it, because the problem's going to be like, the judge said, well, no, I don't believe it. Australia's like, whoa, we believe all this evidence. It's going to be, I imagine, hard for the UK to admit we did it wrong, because isn't that sort of what's happening here? Or do you feel like, and we can go through this if you like, do you think there's a way for the justice to be like, oh, well, we missed something that clearly Australia has now illuminated to us?
Well, it's not even as though it was missed. It was looked at, and he came to a decision which many people now find or feel is just wrong, because in essence it was this. I mean, to many people it sounds absurd, because essentially what he said is because Kevin Murphy was in some degree willing to help with this, because she'd insisted that he make a full statement, then he's less credible. But as the paragraph you've got here, because Amber was pressuring him to get Kate James to make a full statement. But the bit you've got highlighted here, paragraph 134, is the bit that sounds absurd. Because there was no evidence that Kate James was ever asked to sign a statement, let alone a full statement, then it didn't affect Amber's credibility. And I find that absurd. So in other words, it's a bit like saying, let's take it away from this case to make clear this is not about this case, but let's say we're talking about a completely different case, a bribery case. It's a bit like saying that someone has tried to make a bribe, but it didn't work, and because it didn't work, then never mind, it didn't affect their credibility. And I find that absurd. And that's coming back to this. So Amber's tried to insist that Kevin Murphy make a full statement and get him to make Kate James make a full statement, but because she didn't, but
because
Kevin
they didn't do it, right? That suddenly, well, we have no proof.
But now, if this is reopened by Australia and they say, hey, do you know what? We've looked at Kevin Murphy's statement from 2020, which bear in mind was 5 years after the event.
Yeah.
Because all this happened, remember, in 2015 with the dogs. So for those that are not sure what happened here, in short, the dogs were being taken to Australia, but they didn't have the right paperwork. And so Amber was essentially saying to Kevin, hey, look, we don't have the right paperwork. We need to essentially document something that didn't happen, which is in the judgment as well. There's a copy of the email we looked at before, which is paragraph 129 of the judgment, if you wanted to flip back to that. But so essentially, just up a little bit. So there it is, excerpt from an email. The only thing we're missing is evidence that the process was being initiated, however, not completed. But then she goes on, that's obviously harder to prove since it involves documenting something that didn't happen. So she knows it didn't happen, and yet she wants to try to document it to, let's put it bluntly, to fool the Australian government.
An email from Amber Heard saying, well, it didn't happen. However, can we ask Kate to include it in her statement?
Yeah.
And then the lawyer's like, well, that would be great
now,
for her to lie and say that it happened.
So now with Kevin Murphy's statement coming to light in 2020 in the UK case, Australia's thought, well, hang on a minute, let's take a look at this again. Because remember, Amber pleaded guilty to having the documents wrong, but a lesser form of wrong, if you like, than being outright deceptive. It was more a case of, I thought Johnny was handling it and we ticked the wrong box. I was sleep deprived and all the rest of it. Therefore, we inadvertently, mistakenly, somewhat innocently got it wrong. But I'm guilty for that. But actually, this contradicts that. This is Kevin Murphy saying, no, she wanted to falsify it. She wanted people to lie about it.
She wanted Miss James to give a false statement that Miss Heard was unaware that it would be illegal for her to bring the dogs. Miss Heard was aware that this was illegal because I had informed her repeatedly by email, telephone, and in person. I told Miss Heard that I was uncomfortable with giving a false statement to the court and that I would not ask Miss James to do so. Before asking me for requests that Miss James give me a statement, Miss Heard forwarded me an email she received from her email. You could get Kate to sign a statement. It would be helpful. I don't know what your relationship with her is at this time, and since you fired her, you will have to be careful that she will cooperate and not go public if you ask her not to be truthful. Miss Heard wrote back, Marty, I'm waiting to hear back from you before I reach out to Kevin to liaise with Kate. I mean, this is all negotiating to try and get out of this Australian predicament they put themselves in, that they're admitting they put themselves in.
And remember, this bit in paragraph 8 you're looking at now, this was from Amber's lawyer to say, in the middle of that, be careful that she'll cooperate and not go public. Well, there's a saying in the lawyer's profession, when people say, I will tell people this and it won't look good in court. Well, that's a perfect cross-examination question. Like, we're in court. It doesn't look good, does it? And so that's what you've got here. The lawyer is saying, be careful that she'll cooperate and not go public. Well, guess what? We're all talking about it now. It is public.
And the judge didn't care. Judge is like, whatever.
and that's what I take real issue with, because I don't know any lawyer that could seriously look at this chain of events and say it doesn't affect Amber's credibility. It to me, with the greatest respect to a retired High Court judge, to me it's absurd. It just doesn't make sense. It should affect her credibility. It should have shot her testimony down. And just because Kevin Murphy was sort of being, forced, if you like, to say what he was going to say, but he drew the line at making someone else lie. And so the judge said that in the judge's words, he said that's not a great starting point to trust what he has to say. Well, it was Amber that was making him say it. So surely that's not, using the same analogy, it's not a great starting point for Amber either. And that's what Australia is upset about.
Yeah, well said. So the Australia we're looking into, it looks like there is going to be some heat there, and I cannot wait, and we will keep you updated as it's happening. We did tape this. If something's happening as you just watched this, that's why. But Daniel, back to sort of, again, can this affect the UK verdict? Because like I asked in the beginning, it does feel like it makes the UK judge look like he missed something. right? And it's like, it's
Indeed,
not like
it does. Yeah.
And it's not
I
like
mean,
he's saying, well, there's new evidence that this illuminates me. This is something I messed up. And I imagine that's going to make this chance for an appeal even harder, no?
Well, it absolutely should affect the chance for appeal, because not only now you've got the jury verdict, which by and large, arguably everybody trusts more, again, with respect to judges, they trust more than a single judge, because you've got, it's more difficult to convince everybody on a jury, right? For a unanimous verdict. That's why we retain the jury in the UK for criminal trials and we don't for civil trials. So you've got that. Now, if you also have, on top of that, if you have Australia saying, actually, do you know what, we are prosecuting her, and then she ends up, being found guilty for full-on perjury, not just the small version that she agreed to and pleaded guilty to 7 years ago, then all of those taken together should go towards reopening this appeal, because the test for reopening the appeal is that it's got to avoid an injustice. And I suggest that's exactly what this should do, because the wording in the rule is that it's necessary to do so to avoid real injustice, and the circumstances make it exceptional and appropriate to reopen the appeal, and there's no alternative remedy. The alternative remedy, some lawyers will say, well, he's got his judgment in the US, but it's not the same thing. It wasn't the same article. It's not the same case. It's not the same defendant. So the counter argument to that is, the effective remedy has got to be reopen the appeal. But the first two, certainly, in my view, there's no ambiguity. It's necessary to avoid real injustice, and the circumstances are exceptional that make it appropriate. And that's my view on it, especially even now, but especially if Australia find her guilty of perjury.
Well, if you agree with Daniel and you want to support this, let's get this over 100,000 views. So share this petition, get it out there. It's doing pretty well, but let's get it even bigger, because that is going to help to see people upset and talking about it. And you have done this before, as we've discussed. So help Daniel out, sign this petition. Yeah. It's good to hear that this may finally bring some heat to Amber. And I know a lot of us can't wait to figure out what happens in Australia, but I'm glad to hear that it could also potentially affect this UK verdict, because I'm still very frustrated by how it all went down. If you want to get more interesting updates on the UK side, as well as other amazing stuff, check out Black Belt Barrister over on YouTube and hit the subscribe button. In fact, hit the subscribe button here as well. When you hit that, though, also hit the bell so you get all alerts. Smash the like button and leave a comment down below on your thoughts as well. Always a pleasure to have you here, Daniel. Thank you. Come back anytime.
My pleasure.
And we'll have him live on a show soon. So stay tuned here on Popcorn Planet. Thanks, everybody.